Welcome back, friends and family. I'm Codiferrous, and today I'm bringing you Metroid Dread, all bosses ranked from easiest to hardest. A bit of a switch up from our usual action role-playing games, I enjoyed Metroid Dread so much that I thought I'd bring it onto the channel. This entry into the franchise brings us another beautiful 2D Metroid game that continues the story from where we left off in Fusion, which came out on the Game Boy Advance in 2002. Granted that Zero Mission came out in 2004 for the GBA, Dread is the first original 2D Metroid game in 19 years. The wonderfully crafted art style and smoothness of the gameplay mechanics go hand in hand in bringing about an immersive and challenging game. Specifically, I need to talk about the organic and pleasant surprise that is the difficulty of Dread. Each death feels like it's entirely the player's fault, and it's just a matter of getting better and mastering the control. Given that most modern games create an artificial difficulty in their scaling via lazily increasing boss health and damage to players, it's such a perfectly crafted art in making a difficulty that puts the challenge and stress onto players' skill instead of RNG or cheapness. With that said, I really need to give a hand to Metroid Dread as it now joins the likes of Cuphead and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice in achieving this incredible feat. Now, to immediately contradict myself, I am disappointed to say that playing the game through on hard mode, the developers precisely utilized the artificial difficulty scaling that I just described. Changing boss behavior, attack patterns, introducing new attacks, switching weapon and upgrade locations, bringing in new boss ads and enemy variants. Such features that I've come to love and appreciate about difficulty scaling over the years are unfortunately absent. For a game released in 2021, the revelation of a hard mode that simply scaled boss damage and reduced player damage proved to be far more underwhelming than I had hoped. That, along with a relatively short storyline and lackluster unlockables, are really the only critiques I have of the game. But that's being nitpicky. In summary, this is a game that I would recommend to anyone no matter what genre of game they prefer. Now enough sucking off, onto the rules. First and foremost, the enemies and their corresponding central units will not be included in this ranking. Next, this ranking consists entirely of my own opinion, and as such should not be taken as unshakable fact. Everyone's experience with gaming varies, so different players will find different levels of difficulty for each boss. The following gameplay was completed on hard difficulty, and therefore this video is targeted towards players who have cleared Metroid Dread at least once on normal difficulty. With that said, the narrative is aimed at an informed audience instead of those going through the game for the first time. This obviously means that there are spoilers ahead, so consider this to be your warning. With that said, let's get into the thick of things. Number 9. Dragaiga. The conscious tentacle anus finds its way into the number 9 spot on our list. Dragaiga hits for massive damage, but its patterns are too easily circumvented. If you play your cards correctly, you can turn this normally two-phase boss fight into a single-phase fight. To be honest, there isn't much differentiation between Dragaiga's phases. It will begin by flooding the arena from floor to ceiling before opening up with one of two attacks. It will fire 3 balls that slowly descend upon you. Shoot the blue ones to destroy them and replenish your resources, and avoid the red ones altogether as they are indestructible. Dragaiga will also opt for a double tentis slap that is signaled by a drawing back of the front tentacles. 2 well-timed jumps are needed to prevent your wig from being split. The focus of this fight is the main tentacle centered above. Your regular power beam and charge shots will prove effective, so utilize those to save your rockets. After dislodging the tentacle, a button will appear adjacent to you. Blast it with a charge shot to bring the water levels down, before using the grapple beam on the magnet panel above to carry yourself to the other side. Charge blast this button as well to drain the water entirely, where you can finally get some real damage on the boss. Bombard the exposed rectum before melee countering the retaliating tentis slap. This will enter a damage sequence where you can pop off another barrage before the boss resets and floods the chambers once more. If your damage was optimized, you will likely have triggered Phase 2. Phase 2 has the same core behavior as Phase 1, but with a little added spice. It appears that a serum was found to treat Dragaiga's blue ball condition, lessening the symptoms to merely a single blue ball, but now bringing the added side effect of dueling red balls. Additionally, Dragaiga brings in his most difficult move of all. When you see 3 tentacles coiled together, you'll need to grapple beam up to the spider panel for safety, as the tentacles will execute a wide-spanning attack that hits fairly hard. Outside of this, it's business as usual. Shoot the tentacle, shoot the button, Spider-Man away, shoot the button, missile away, counter, add a pickle, sausage, avocado, a squeeze of orange, you got breakfast. Let's start with the Musby. A harmless little Musby. Now change that Musby into a big Musby, and change that big Musby into a bigger Musby, and then I mail it to myself. And when it arrives, the most surprising boss of the bunch was just as surprisingly difficult the first time I battled him on normal. However, once you know the tricks of the trade, the Great Golzuna offers little challenge. Blasting through these first 2 phases, if you will, the actual boss fight can begin. When you boil it down, the Golzuna really only has 2 means of attack. the impressive frontal slam, and the shocking cross bombs, granted that the cross bombs come in several varieties. The slam attack is largely telegraphed, takes up a large area of effect, and sends out a shockwave when it connects with the ground. If there's room, the attack is dodged by jumping just as the claws hit the floor. If you are pinned against the wall, you can instead slide underneath the boss when it rears up. Slightly ashamed to admit it, but I didn't know about the slide maneuver until my third playthrough. Anyways, not important. Once you know about the slide maneuver, you should never get hit by this attack. It will only bring disgrace to your descendants. The vastly more dangerous attack will be the electric cross bombs. The most common form of this attack will see 4 singularities moving to form a rectangular pattern. After a brief delay, they will detonate, forming a rectangle of energy that deals substantial damage if you fail to dodge. Jumping in the middle of the singularities or phase shifting to the complete other side of the arena will result in you getting out scot-free. The more dangerous variant of this attack will have 4 singularities lined up diagonally. For this, you need to just get the hell out, as the resulting explosion will create a tightly knit network of fuckery that will James shade your ass if you do anything except jump and flash out of there. The final cross-bomb attack consists of a single homing singularity that will chase after you while intermittently pausing to release a cross burst. Just stay on the move with space jumps and flash shifts and you should have a relatively easy time escaping scratches in your armor. Golzuna is much like me, and that his ass is his only weak point. Charging up storm missiles will bring about a quick end to this fight. In each moment that you're dodging his offensive, be preparing your next salvo and never get too greedy or overconfident. While the attacks are simple to avoid, they all do substantial amounts of damage, so messing up just a few times will send you to the game over screen. Eventually, you'll clap his cheeks hard enough for it to transform into Minior, where it'll attack you with some loop-de acrobatics. Keep with the rockets and you'll knock X cells out of him like a piñata, that you can then absorb to recover health and ammunition. This is a very short phase and a weak ending for an otherwise impressive boss. Defeating Golzuna rewards you with cross bombs of your own, albeit not as awesome as his are. Number 7. Corpius. The first boss of the game kicks things off with a simple first phase that showcases a switch-up of 3 basic attacks. His first most common attack will be a quick swipe with the tail that is precluded by a brief rattling. To avoid this, simply jump at the appropriate time or step backwards. His second attack will be an acid glob that he spits out at range, which you can simply shoot to recover rocket ammunition and health. His final attack will be a tail stab that plants into the ground, which is avoided by stepping in either direction. This tail plant is signaled by a drawback and flexing of the tip, hashtag most attractive sentence of the 21st century. When he plants his tail on the ground, step in towards him to get free damage off. Your instincts will tell you to retreat, but if you do, you are wasting your opportunity to nuke the silly putty out of his face flaps. To lay down the pain, you're going to need to shoot Corpius in the face with either your missiles or charge shots. Hitting the appropriate threshold will trigger a cinematic where the boss turns invisible and gets a glowy tail tip, signifying his new spot of vulnerability. His attacks remain the same, but you are now able to shoot the glowy tail bit with your power beam, rockets, and charge shots, so pick your poison. If you need to conserve rockets, however, then please do, as you will need them for the third phase. After becoming visible again, Corpius will turn around to show you the Lower East Side. You're going to need to slide underneath him, which will trigger a brief counter sequence. Hit the melee counter at the appropriate time and you'll have the chance to stuff missiles down his mouth like there are Flintstone vitamins. Miss the melee counter and you'll instead be skewered for your blunder. The same attacks will be present, but Corpius will show a biased preference for a new one, where he will breathe a cloud of acid in a line towards you. The newly apparent magnet panels will save you from this, where you can then launch out missiles from the high ground. If you choose to stay up here, be ready to jump ship as the boss will attempt to swat you down. The safest bet will be to jump clear over him and onto the other side to create some spacing. Otherwise, continue as normal. Melee counter at every opportunity to hit him with the big damage. Your reward for defeating Corpius will be the Phantom Cloak. Number 6. Ex Machina Elite. A recurring mini-boss we've chosen to include on this list, the Ex Machina Elite comes bearing a shield which lends him invulnerability from frontal attacks. The Machina has a shallow move pool, but he makes up for it with a high attack turnover and moderate damage output. The most common offensive will be a shield charge that you can spin jump over. Take this opportunity to blast his ass a time or two before he resets the shield position. Alternatively, the Machina will jump on the wall before slamming down at your location. A simple flash shift executed just as it leaves the wall will take you out of harm's way. Make usage of your storm missiles at every opportunity, and that about does it for this phase. Nice and simple. Dealing enough damage will push this boss to mutate into its second phase, where its face splits open to reveal a giant toothy maw. The shield is cast aside, which opens up the boss's vulnerabilities, but in exchange it becomes much more aggressive. It maintains the rushing attack and wall slam, but they've been upgraded. The rushing attack has less startup time and a much wider reach, and the slam now fires off sludge-like shockwaves in both directions. The new attack to worry about now is the gunk shot. This attack fires a wide missile that persists at target location, effectively splatooning your Metroidian cheeks. Seriously, this move does much more damage than it should and needs to be avoided at all costs. Time a flash shift at the instant the attack fires off, and you should be able to lay in with some storm missile barrages. At every available interval, keep up the blasting. The second phase is hectic as can be, so the sooner you can bring it to an end, the better. After getting the X-Machina Elite to critical health, you'll need to complete 2 melee counters to finish the fight. Number 5, Robot Chozo Soldier. While this is another recurring boss fight, we'll only be counting the first encounter with the Robot Chozo Soldier, as it is easily the hardest. The Chozo Soldier has only 4 attacks in its arsenal, but executes just the right amount of switch up that requires one to actively counterplay against. At a distance, the Chozo will utilize its blaster, whose projectiles come in a variety of 2. The more common attack is a short 3-round burst, which can be tricky to dodge dependent on your current location when the attack launches. It can also opt for its more dangerous, yet more easily dodged charge shot. The projectile is larger, but travels slower, which gives you plenty of opportunity to evade. But these attacks are just meant to shake you up while the Robo gets in close for the true ass whooping. The Chozo boasts 2 melee attacks that are very similar in animation, but the slight difference between the attacks is the difference between getting a sick ass melee counter or taking a US standard ass ton of damage. If there is a blue gleam, then the boss will execute a lightning-fast EI strike that you need to melee counter with precision. Doing so will restore your resources, as well as providing a damage sequence for you to take advantage of. If you see a red gleam, then you need to jump and flash shift out of there quickly, as the Chozo Soldier will drag its blade against the ground for a wide-reaching uppercut slash. Jumping over this attack after it has started is futile, as the blade reaches skyward, catching you in the air mid-jump. For this fight, I recommend keeping to the higher platforms. Flash shift between each side of the arena and punish the Chozo as it maneuvers its way toward you. Its jump patterns are highly predictable, so you should be able to make your shots land a vast majority of the time. Just as the boss reaches your platform, you're going to want to flash shift to the opposing side and repeat. Make proper usage of your jump, flash shift, and ducking maneuvers for the power beam attacks. If you are quick on your timing, then melee counter the blue blade strikes at every opportunity to speed things up. Just try not to get greedy, otherwise you'll eat a few red blades instead. In case some of you are wondering why I chose to include this Chozo Soldier battle over the 2 Chozo Soldier battle, the answer is simple. By the time you fight the 2 Chozos, you have the Plasma Beam, and more importantly, the Storm Missiles, which make mincemeat out of each of them. In contrast, your first encounter has you relying on charge shots, a limited rocket supply, and having a much smaller health pool to consider. With that said, on to the next one. Number 4, Eschew. This fight is likely to be one of the fastest ones because Eschew will either kill you or be killed in record time. Eschew kicked my ass in my first playthrough on hard mode. Originally, I'd cleared the game once on normal with close to 70% item completion before immediately doing a playthrough on hard mode. On normal, I largely tanked boss attacks instead of dodging or countering. On hard mode, you can't be doing that. Eschew makes an entrance by flying into the arena from the background and hovering for a second. You'll have the chance to fire off 2 rockets or so before it activates an electric cloak that makes it immune to all of your attacks. Eschew has 3 means of inflicting damage, and let me tell you, each of these attacks dishes it out in generous amounts. His primary attack is a dark glob that is launched at your location. This projectile moves at a moderate speed, so you should be able to dodge it with reasonable ease. Don't get too comfortable, however, because if the glob connects with the ground, there will be a very brief delay before it detonates, shocking the entire surface. Both the glob and the aftershock deal substantial damage, so you are definitely going to want to avoid this as much as possible. Eschew doesn't follow any real pattern after its opening move, so there is an equal chance that it may opt for its missile swarm or charge attack. The missile swarm is its most dangerous attack in my experience. As the name blatantly implies, Eschew will let loose a large number of small homing projectiles that move at a relatively fast pace. Because Metroid is not like most games, you cannot damage boost your way through the swarm. Each projectile that makes contact will deal its own proper amount of damage. Getting hit by 1 or 2 of these won't be that big of a deal, but being cornered when this attack is launched can instantly spell certain doom. I recommend that you always keep yourself positioned appropriately in respect to the boss. Don't stand too close, but at the same time avoid sitting in the corner. When the missiles are launched, you can flash shift 2 times across the screen to dodge the majority, if not all of the missiles. If a few of them linger, follow up with a well-timed jump. Alternatively, you can time a double jump to hop over the attack altogether. After popping off enough range attacks, Askew will do a full-bodied slam attack. This attack is signaled by the boss rearing back ever so slightly. The cloak drops after performing the charge, so take every opportunity to let off some rockets in turn. This boss is appropriately defeated by spamming ye old rockets. Keep in mind that Askew is invulnerable while the electric cloak persists, so don't bother wasting any rockets while it's up. Just like Olzuna, Askew will shapeshift into a Minior when its health becomes critical. You know the drill. Again, a very short phase and another weak ending for an otherwise well-designed and heavy-hitting boss. Absorb the final X cell to obtain the Storm Missile upgrade. Now, let it go on record that Askew would have ranked higher on this list, but on my 5th playthrough of the game, I discovered that you can actually Shine Spark Askew to deal massive damage at the very start of the fight, making this encounter much shorter and easier to deal with. Number 3. Kraid. Kraid makes his return to the Metroid series in beautiful 3D. The space pirate comes in featuring a well put together 3-phase fight with an appropriate amount of challenge. Upon discovering Kraid mysteriously chained up, Samus all but antagonizes the crap out of him, leading right into his pseudo-restrained Phase 1. Phase 1 sees Kraid alternating between 2 attacks. He will likely lead with his ball regurgitation, the many of which you can blast to recover missiles and health. Keep an eye out for the occasional fireball, however, as they cannot be destroyed, meaning that you'll need to dodge instead. Kraid's second attack will be a casual toss of the Talon, which somehow seems to be in a limitless supply. These Talons are pretty tough to break with your standard attacks, so they are best dispatched with a single rocket. If you want to play the dodge game, then be my guest. The goal of this first phase is to shoot Kraid in the mouth. A single missile to the face will enrage him to the point that you can feed him some explosive ordnance. If you can multitask, then a strong opportunity to do this will be during the regurgitation volley. Don't be prude with the rockets, as destroying the vomit balls will keep your supply topped off. After getting full off of your fragmented explosives, Phase 2 will trigger, causing Kraid to destroy your platform, where you will then face off against the most dreaded boss of all, Beer Gut! But seriously, like what the hell? Not sure why Nintendo thought to include this in any game of theirs outside of WarioWare, but here we are. If you perform the secret sequence break, then patiently wait, I'll get back to you in a minute. This visually appealing and completely non-repulsive phase has Kraid spewing projectile balls out of his stomach hole. You can use your power beam or missiles for this phase, but ultimately you're going to have to damage the central stomach hole while avoiding the projectiles that come in 3 varieties. The most common will be a bouncing ball that you can destroy with your attacks. The ball doesn't always follow the same pattern, so pay attention and take evasive action as needed. If a purple ball is spawned forth, then it will detonate a small acid splash on impact, which demands that you jump over it. Finally, Kraid will fire off 3 spikes horizontally, which can only be dodged by crouching. All the while that this is happening, keep up the assault on the purple stomach hole, and eventually Kraid will fire off some spikes with enough force to drop down a spider magnet panel. Now, climb aboard the panel to ride up to the top and deliver the man some tums. This third phase emulates Phase 1, but you are now immobile as you missile your way to victory. Kraid has 2 new attacks that you're going to want to keep note of. If he goes for a melee attack with his right arm, you will be able to melee counter to dish out the pain in turn. If he goes for a left-handed punch, then dismount because this attack is unavoidable. If Kraid knocks you down at any point during this third phase, then you will be back to repeating Phase 2 with the Beer Gut. Rinse and repeat. Alternatively, performing the sequence break to get morph bombs early will make life a hell of a lot easier. Because this is a boss guide as well as a boss ranking, I will give a very brief overview on this sequence break. First, you will need to have acquired the Various suit. Instead of going directly to Kraid, you're going to travel to Dairon and head to the heated room at the bottom center of the map. On the right side, there is a breakable block that will take you to the first sequence break. Slide, jump, and backpedal wall jump to make it to the morph tunnel above. At the end of the tunnel, you will have to perform possibly the worst slide jump maneuver ever designed to hopefully cling and mantle over the wall. It is in your best interest to nail these jumps, as failure to do so will prove fatal. You have a chance at surviving the fall from the first failed jump, but failing the second jump will definitely kill you. Continue to Arteria to obtain the grapple beam early. Travel back to Dairon and enter the ME zone to the far left where you can grapple beam the lock and proceed. Turn on the generator and travel backwards to the missile door you skipped earlier to obtain the morph bombs. And now we head back to Codiferrous and fight Kraid as planned. If you want a more thorough guide, then there are many videos and detailed walkthroughs on how to accomplish this. This sequence break requires a lot of trial and error, specifically this bullshit jump maneuver right here. So if it proves too frustrating, then don't sweat it, just go beat him the old-fashioned way. Speaking of which, let's get back to Kraid. Now that you have the morph bombs, go through the first phase as normal. When the second phase starts, you're going to roll into the left corner and drop a bomb, revealing a hidden morph ball launcher. Start him up and you will be propelled directly into Kraid's digestive tract, where you can directly administer the Tums that he's been looking for. Please note that you will need a moderate amount of health for this, as your health will slowly drain from being digested all the while this takes place. Even though the sequence break makes Kraid's fight trivial, the sequence break itself is difficult in its own right. Therefore, Kraid still maintains his number 3 spot no matter what route you take. In any case, Kraid's fate remains the same as he destroys the surrounding structures and sinks into the lava below. Number 2, The Experiment, number Z57. The Experiment is my favorite boss in the game. His design, offensive arsenal, and difficulty scaling are all a grand work of art, not to mention the build-up to his fight itself. Early in the game, you come across a room that has a large dead alien that somewhat resembles Scorpius, being picked and prodded by machine arms. If you kept a keen eye like I did, then you will notice that later in the game, after Samus releases the X, you'll pass by this room and see that the alien is no longer there. And thus the anticipation runneth over. This fight is encountered on the latter end of the game after you obtained most available upgrades and need to travel to Codiferrous to defrost Arteria. Coming out of a morph ball launcher, it is revealed that the Experiment, having been cuddled up to the thermal generator, has been the reason for the heat cutoff from the rest of the world. The fight begins immediately with a dual chop. This attack will display a large swipe from the left and right that covers a majority of the available space. The attack is largely telegraphed by the boss leaning back and raising both appendages up. Time a space jump towards the middle of the screen near the boss's face just as he goes for the swipe. Following the introduction, it's time to turn up the heat. Z57 will open up its maw and fire off an awesome beam that scorches the earth beneath you. The attack comes in 2 waves, and your only opportunity for salvation is to jump across to the small zone of safety as he takes a breath to complete the attack. All the while, you should be firing off ice rockets at every opportunity. If you're up for it, feel free to use storm missiles as well. After several passes, Z57 will use a different variation of the mouth laser that starts up high before bringing it in low. Naturally, you're going to be blasting away at his face as you are slowly forced into close proximity to him. At the conclusion of the attack, the Experiment will abruptly rear back and go for a chomp. You can flash shift away for a safe play, but as always I recommend going for the counter to get an awesome grapple cinematic. You can't use storm missiles during the grapple, so just stick with All Reliable and spam rockets as you go for a world tour. Not only is this grapple cinematic badass as can be, but it will substantially damage the boss and speed up the fight, all but guaranteeing the second phase. Here, Experiment Z57 will introduce a few new attacks. His dual chop now has a cross-slash follow-up that covers the vast majority of the screen and can only be avoided by space jumping up in his grill. Be careful not to linger too long, however, as running into the boss's face will hurt you. His more reserved attack entails him splaying out his arms at different sections of the wall while firing a purple ball of electricity that homes in on you. If you stand still for too long, the ball will detonate, and needless to say, it will feel like anything but a shiatsu massage. While on the move, you're going to want to charge up a salvo of storm rockets targeting each limb as well as the Experiment's face. Successfully hitting each extremity of the boss will cause him to drop some rockets for you to replenish your stock. But of course, I saved the best for last, the move you've all been waiting for, the F-Zero Gauntlet. Experiment Z57 will draw in a large amount of breath before blasting into the fans to create a wind tunnel that pushes you to the left. You're going to be forced to continuously run to the right while avoiding waves of energy that launch out in varying patterns and intervals. Getting hit by these will deal damage and knockback, and touching the left side wall will deal additional damage, so it's in your best interest to not get double wall banged. The best method for dodging this attack is to keep your eyes trained on the incoming blasts and not on your character. Stick to using just single and double jumps, and don't make an overzealous attempt to space jump weave your way between the openings. Eventually the waves and fans will die out and the battle will resume as normal. This attack takes a decent amount of practice and precision to successfully navigate, so don't feel discouraged if it keeps beating your brakes off. While it is instinctual to be attacking the boss at all times of the day, it is more advantageous to take a reserved approach. Health drops are essentially non-existent in this fight, so every bit of HP matters. Stay on your toes and choose your opportunities for attack wisely, and with enough patience, you'll Terminator 2 this sumbitch in due time. Number 1, Ravenbeak. What a surprise! The most difficult boss in the game is the last boss, and when a game is privy to its own difficulty scaling, you know it's going to be good. The final bout with Ravenbeak that's been teased since the beginning of the game sits properly at the number 1 slot. Ravenbeak has a large variety of attacks used throughout the fight that prompt you to make use of all of your abilities thus far. His first phase utilizes both melee and ranged energy attacks. When up close and personal, Ravenbeak will lunge up to 3 times in succession, gap closing and giving you knockback with each swing. A single jump plus flash shift will oversight this attack entirely. Unfortunately, this is his only predictable attack because the rest of the arsenal can be employed at any range. Ravenbeak's favorite attack combo comprises of his Dark Energy Sphere followed by the No Zone Beam. The Dark Sphere moves slowly towards Samus while steadily growing in size. This orb must be destroyed and takes about 4 rockets to do so. You're welcome to use the Storm Rockets or Ice Rockets in this scenario. Destroying the orb will provide some refreshments for your health and ammo. Shortly after firing off the orb, Ravenbeak will channel his No Zone Beam, which covers the screen in a pink light. This attack deals constant damage similar to entering a frozen zone pre-gravity suit. To preserve your life, you're going to need to position yourself real close and personal to Ravenbeak to stay out of the effective space. Be prepared to jump and flash shift after the fact as he will follow up with a melee combo. Ravenbeak's last 2 attacks are more dramatic and hard-hitting. When you see Ravenbeak pull back his left hand and charge up with a red glow, he's going to perform a screen-wide rushing attack that you need to melee counter just before he makes contact with you. The pure power behind this attack will render a slow-mo damage scene before completely laying Samus out and leaving your underwear exactly 1 shit-ton heavier. The final attack is telegraphed by Ravenbeak's dramatic flourish and wind-up, followed by a glowing wave that fills up most of the screen. You're going to need to go into Morph Ball to avoid the incoming death ray and melee counter for the follow-up. Countering either of these attacks will trigger a damage sequence that will unsurprisingly feature a lot of rockets. Hitting Ravenbeak with enough rockets will trigger his second phase where he becomes wrapped in a gold aura. When this happens, he becomes immune to all damage while still utilizing the same attacks as phase 1. The only added move here is that occasionally Ravenbeak will taunt you in the spirit of Kingdom Hearts' Hercules. If you rush him and melee counter at the appropriate instant, then you will go into an extended damage sequence. Please be aware of that for this second phase, the melee counter damage sequences are the only way to hurt Ravenbeak. With that said, focus your effort on playing reactively and conserve your ammo. Keep a special lookout for those counter opportunities and punish accordingly. Doing so will push us onward to phase 3. Ravenbeak turns airborne and gains an entirely new moveset. This phase also does not drop any health or ammo, so hopefully you didn't waste too many of your resources earlier on in the fight. Ravenbeak has an impressive mix-up of offensive capabilities, being able to attack from any angle and at any range. Because he doesn't show a preference for any one attack, it is very difficult to play proactively here. Ravenbeak's more basic attacks for this phase feature a point-blank blast from his Hyper Beam and a descending slam attack from above. Flash Shift will be your best friend in dodging both of these moves. The more troublesome moves are the Bullet Storm and Corkscrew Charge. The Bullet Storm will have Ravenbeak displaying a target laser and tracking Samus for a moment before unleashing rapid-fire blasts. When this happens, don't bother with attacking, just focus on space jumping and flash shifting in a circle around the boss to avoid the onslaught. When the attack ends, don't get too comfortable with the rockets, as Ravenbeak will often use this attack 2 times consecutively. The Corkscrew Charge is dangerous in that while it has a short windup, it is very fast in execution and deals substantial damage. It can also be used just after the Bullet Storm while you are still airborne, which essentially frame locks you and leaves you no room to dodge. If used at ground level, you can dodge the charge attack by simply sliding underneath. This section of the battle is all about dodging and launching missiles. Storm missile salvos go a long way for this fight, as Ravenbeak is very nimble in this phase, and having that guaranteed lock-on damage is everything you're going to be needing. Defeating the boss here triggers the 4th phase of the fight, where Big R&B makes a show about glorifying self-mutilation. This phase brings out the main course of the drawn-out encounter. Ravenbeak now implements all of his attacks from the beginning and busts out the final party favors, introducing his Sunburst, Shine Spark, and Grounded Hyper Beam. The Shine Spark shares an exact likeness to your own and delivers an incredible amount of damage should you fail to jump at the proper time. It will catch you off guard initially for sure, but the angle and telegraph of the attack are largely predictable. The real knockout attack comes from the Sunburst. R&B will charge up for a moment before setting a large orb to the center of the screen that will radiate bursts of energy with small openings throughout for you to slip through. But that's not all. He will also mix in his other attacks while this is going on, primarily his Hyper Beam. You've seen this move in the previous phase and its functionality is the same here, except with a larger targeting field. If you are ever to die to the boss at this stage, the chances are high that it is the Sunburst that does you in. The timing of the attacks is usually offset enough that you can take 3 to 4 hits back to back and consequently have to start over. But before you suicide run yourself into oblivion, allow me to save you the trouble and let you in on a secret. You can actually destroy the Sunburst. If you release a Morph Ball Power Bomb, it will destroy the Sunburst and replenish your resources. I did not discover this until my third playthrough of the game, so please give a moment's silence for the dozens of deaths that have allowed me to bring you this information. Otherwise, shoot the dark sphere when it appears, counter when necessary, and just do your very best. Defeating this boss gives you the final cutscene in a cool interactive execution of Ravenbeak X in what really should have been a fully fleshed out final boss phase. And that's going to do it for this list. As part of a new feature that I am adding to these boss rankings, the Harmless Henchman Award for the least threatening boss, killing me exactly 0 times, goes to Galzuna, Corpius, and Drogaiga. That's right, our very first placement is a 3-way tie. The Lethal Adversary Award for the most deadly enemy goes to Robot Chozo Warrior, killing me a whopping 6 times. This is of course counted across all encounters with this boss, including both the single combat as well as the 2-on-1s. Metroid Dread was a kick in the pants for a first time playthrough, but admittedly loses its challenge and therefore its replay value on subsequent runs of the game. Nonetheless, a great addition to the Metroidvania catalog, and hopefully more gems of the genre can be released in the future for me to add to the channel. But until then, take care, stay safe, stay happy, and I'll be seeing you soon. Bye bye.